Danny, good morning to you, buddy.
Good morning to you.
Great to have you here.
It's always good to be here.
So, anything changed since I last saw you?
Now, which way? We can talk about the physical aspect, or we can talk about the law. And
just mentioned that your entrance was a bit more deliberate today.
Yes, it was.
You doing okay?
I am.
All right, good to hear, man.
Always good to be here, Rob.
So, quick question for you here: will there be cake later today?
Yes.
Right. Then, in that case, my job is done here.
And
earlier is better.
Is John and Bill going?
John and Bill are going. Yeah.
Well,
Maria can't make it, but maybe Bill can take Maria's place.
Yeah, that's true. And the cake will challenge Mary Beth.
Oh,
it is really good.
Oh, hope she's not listening.
I know.
She'll expect a delivery. I can tell
Does this mean there's already a slice missing? If you know
my
that it's really
secretary
good.
took
If
a
you knew
piece
my
of
wife,
that
that
cake.
would be.
Okay. Oh, it's your secretary took it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Danny knows this baker in Hampshire County,
Julie Landis
Julie Landis. She used to be the pastry chef
at Nemacolin in Pennsylvania.
By the Laurel Mountains.
Yeah, and probably was going up the ladder, and boyfriend back in Romney, West Virginia, and so she left Nemacolin, came back to Romney.
Wow.
And unknown, it's kind of like a little known secret that she's working there, but if you ever need, pastries or cake, she's really good.
It's cake like you've never tasted before. Cake like this.
I might have to have a piece delivered.
I can't explain it. I can only taste it.
He says it's a cake that just doesn't quit.
It doesn't.
Just keeps giving.
My uncle was a chef.
Oh, really?
And a very high up chef, and they have a way of layering food so that with each bite that you take, each chew, another flavor, comes out, and this is what she does with the cake.
She really does. Really does. It's great.
And his tomato sauce pepperoni cakes were outstanding, right?
Oh,
served every.
He was a legit world famous chef. He was.
Wow.
He was in a society of chefs. You had to die. Someone has to die before the next person gets in. Really
Wow.
high level stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Danny, as we approach the end of this calendar year, it struck me the other day that you might need to update wills, get some things in order that you otherwise may have been putting off for a long time.
And I'll start in a different aspect. About every 5 years, you should look at the will, your testamentary documents to make sure they're in order, make sure they make sense to cover yourself and your loved ones when you pass. One of the things I see a lot of is people will come in and they'll say, "I want a trust," because they hear a lot about trust on TV.
What's the difference between a trust and a will?
Well, the trust is you're putting it in, it's like a separate entity, and it manages the assets, for your loved ones, but it goes outside the estate. It's the probate. Everybody is afraid of probate. Mm-hmm. But West Virginia probate is pretty simple. Mm-hmm. The legislature has really helped in that sense of making it much more simple. But many times you don't need a trust, because you spend a lot of money to create the trust. You've got to move assets over.
Go ahead and talk into your microphone there.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I get that. What is that? The Italian expression, throwing my hands out when I
Throw
talk?
in the air, yeah. You're good. You can use your hands all you want. So make sure you talk into your microphone.
I'm sorry. I will definitely. But anyway, the point being is you got to move assets into the trust. And then you got to create this entity. Then you've got to get an ID number for the trust. And so I remember in law school, we always talked about what it was called a poor man's trust. And basically what that is, for example, if you got bank accounts, you got investment accounts, put a payable upon death to the loved one. That will protect. It goes outside. Basically, it goes outside the estate, and many times creditors can't touch it. So rather than doing the trust, you're doing it by just changing your investment accounts. And we've already talked about transfer on death deeds. Transfer on death deeds to protect the asset if you were to go into a nursing home, but it goes outside the estate. Again, it's another way to protect the assets without creating a trust.
But if I'm still married when I die and I don't have a will, don't all of my assets directly go to my wife as a default?
Question, because that kicks into another point I want to make. I mean, say you're separated.
Yeah.
And you haven't got a divorce, and you're still friends with your separated, spouse, but you don't want her to get anything. You don't have a will, and you're dating another lady. It goes back to the separated spouse.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So that's why you got to look at it, and that's why I tell people, look at your will.
Because that's the natural default. It goes to the surviving spouse.
It does. It
Right.
does. I mean, and then you get into, the intestate succession. Because many people today are what I call the spouses that you had a spouse, you got divorced, now you're with a new spouse. She has children from a previous marriage. You die without a will. Now the previous child or the current spouse is going to be receiving assets if you don't have a will, and it might be going down to her children, which you didn't anticipate. You might want it to go down to your children that you had by the previous marriage. So, like I said, you want to have that will updated, make sure that it follows what you want.
There was a segment we ran the other day, and the younger generation is very much video, right? Recording things on different platforms. And there are many people now who are recording their wills, video wills.
Yes.
And the attorney who's the expert in the feature said that most states don't recognize video wills as being legitimate.
That's not in the statute, the video wills. But where I thought you were going is, people are getting older. You've got children that are upset with mom or dad, or they're upset with each of their siblings. So they claim, oh, mom wasn't competent when she executed that will. So that's why many people will do a video showing mom, you go through, you ask a question, who's the president of the United States? What day of the week is it? Just to show her competency so children can't come.
So the video can supplement and support the written will, but the video will as its own entity won't stand?
I don't know if the courts will do that. They might, but it's not in the statute.
So if it's not in the statute, the court wouldn't recognize it.
That's what I would anticipate.
Well, with the proliferation of AI and deep fakes, I would think that video wills would be really vulnerable to that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Unless you have your video will, put on Betamax or something.
Who could play it back?
Exactly.
Yes.
But that's what I was wondering. It can be in addition to, but not in lieu of.
That's what in my opinion, that's what I would worry about, and I'd want it in writing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Danny, we have a trust.
Yes.
And a will.
Yes.
Is that overkill?
No. I mean, sometimes, give you an example. Sometimes trusts are really good, but I'm not.
Everything of value that we have is in the trust.
That's okay.
And then the will is kind of
rollover into the trust.
Yeah.
So, that's fine.
But do we need to have both? Is the will? Somebody has to go. Because I just met with Will Lawrenson the other day, not on a different thing, but
sure.
Just, in a party environment. But when somebody passes, you have to go to the probate office and announce their passing.
Yes.
And hand them
death certificate. And a will.
And a will.
Yes.
And the trust.
Well, the trust is going to go outside the estate. So the trust is really not going through probate. Okay? But, when you do the forms with the asset, listing of the assets, 601, 602, the 602, you would list the trust sitting over there because that is that's part of the assets that goes not going through the estate, but listing the total assets. And the reason the Form 602 is in place is because the IRS wants to know if you have more than $25 million for a husband and wife. So they're checking to see if you're trying to roll it away, from going through probate. But most times, most people. Now, John, I know you're the exception. You're over that $25 million, buddy.
Well, he passed that a long time ago.
One day.
So, but technically, the probate in West Virginia is pretty straightforward. And Will does a great job, and his staff do a great job working with you and helping you to get it done.
Well, how about on the practical level? When you have mom or dad is living with son or daughter,
yes.
and whoever it is, mom passes,
yes,
and there are immediate expenses that have to be taken care of.
Yes.
What can mom have done to make that easier for her kids in those initial moments in terms of is it hard to get access to her checking account, to the bank accounts?
Well, again, the bank's going to ask, do you have a death certificate? And show the death certificate. They should release the money.
And if the son or daughter is not on the account, will they still release the money?
No, then you've got to go through the probate process and take the death certificate in and the will or whatever, and then you get a letter of appointment from the probate office. You take that with the death certificate over to the bank to get access to the money.
Is that an overnight quick trip down there, or is that
no? Because the death certificate could take several weeks to get.
Okay, so we got truly immediate expenses that happen when somebody passes.
But that's why I'm telling you to have a payable upon death on your bank account. The insurance is going to take a while too, but bank accounts.
So explain that, the payable upon death.
Payable upon death. Mom and dad have a bank account. And so you put okay, mom passes, now dad passes, but when both pass, it's going to roll, it's going to go out to a loved one, say Rob. He's going to inherit all that money that you're going to leave him.
Thank you, John, by the way.
Yes.
Oh, that's $25 million.
So anyway, you take the death certificate to the bank, but again, that's not quick money. Or you could put a child on as a owner of the account to be able to get that money pretty quickly too.
Well, there's another problem with that. If they are truly co-owner, they are co-owner, so they can they can spend mom and dad's.
That's why you got to trust them.
Yeah, right.
And you might want to sit down and have that that heart-to-heart conversation with them.
So that's the reason I think
to get to the trust.
I haven't looked at this document, certainly not in 5 years. But I think that is all taken care of in the trust. It's really laid out that
because the trust owns the money. And again,
I see.
So it's two separate entities. The trust sits over here. It's not a person. And then mom and dad are sitting here. But the trust, whoever the trustee is, and again, you're going to have to trust the trustee.
And the heir, we got one son, the heir is the trustee.
You really trust your son?
Well, I'm not going to be here, so,
What do you care what it is?
That's right. But yes, I do. He's a fine young man. But is there no legal problems with that?
No.
Right? Okay.
No. I mean, these are all structures, all the things you got to think about. Pretty much you're going to be able to get access to your funds pretty quickly. The banks will work with you to get the funds over to you. But these are things you got to I mean, it's like a husband and wife situation. Husband goes into a nursing home. You don't want mom's assets rolling over to dad because he's in a nursing home getting public assistance. Now he's going to be disqualified. All these things come into play. You've got children under the age of 18. You want to trust because you don't want, if I got money at 18, it would have been spent on a car, a trip, someplace. Right. You want to hold that money until the child gets some maturity on it before it's distributed.
So Danny, let's talk about, you talked about nursing homes, and I had my preview, it's the public health career. I was worked in long-term care. So you have your loved one that's going to go in a nursing home, and you're on a checking account with them. Say your mom or your dad. Mm-hmm. You're on a checking account with them, and their Social Security checks go in there, their retirement checks go in there, and so you go in a nursing home, and the family members automatically think, well, I'm going to go ahead and spend that money before my parent goes in the nursing home. I see what's coming down the road here, 6 months, 9 months down the road. Uh-huh. Mom or dad or both are getting sick. They can't take care of themselves. They're going to have to go in a nursing home.
You start spending. That's
I'm going to spend that money,
but that's a gift, and therefore you can't protect that money because. Mm-hmm. DHHR, Department of Health and Human Resources, is going to say, we want to see all the assets.
Right.
They're going to see money being spent on child. They're going to say that's a gift, and now you're penalized from receiving public assistance because that money was taken out of mom and dad's account.
Right.
But going through that's why I always say power of attorney, because with the power of attorney, there's a way to separate the money between mom and dad's in a nursing home because we men are the weaker sex. I keep saying that all the time. So now what we do is we're going to take dad's money through the power of attorney and buy what is called a Medicaid qualified annuity, move it over to mom, because I can do it between mom and dad. If I do it right, I've just protected all the money.
Right.
And that's why I need a good power of attorney. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say a good power of attorney, because you need certain language in there.
Right.
You need gifting paragraph, meaning dad gives mom the authority to move those assets. Mm-hmm. Because you go to the bank and mom says, I want to move the assets. Bank's going to look at you and say,
right?
Because it looks like you're taking the money out
before you go into a nursing home, because or be able to qualify for Medicaid, you have to have under a certain amount.
Under $2,000, $2,500 in Maryland. Yeah. But again, if I've got the power of attorney, I can move those assets, even if they're in a nursing home.
But don't you then have to wait for the availability of a Medicaid bed as opposed to?
Well, that gets into another point. Two things you got to think about. One is you've got to be medically qualified, meaning I can't just say I'm going to a nursing home. You have to fail what is called 5 activities of daily living, number one. Number two, then you have to search for that Medicaid bed. And West Virginia is pretty good with the beds. I mean, for example, I might not be able to get into a nursing home here in Martinsburg, but I tell people, let's get them into Jefferson or Baker, West Virginia, or Berkeley Springs. Berkeley Springs has wonderful nursing homes over there. Then once I get them into a Medicaid qualified bed, then I'll look for beds here closer so I don't have to travel so far. But the key is to get them into that nursing home.
And if the kid wants to keep mom or dad, who would otherwise be going to the nursing home, at home and
yes.
get them at-home care, can they do that through Medicaid as well?
Medicaid's really hard to get. We've talked about that before in the show because for the state, they'll have somebody call mom, let's say, or dad, and they'll say, how you doing today? I'm doing pretty good. Because everybody says, yeah, I'm doing good. Okay, you're disqualified because you're doing good. It's the same criteria as if you're going into a nursing home. It's, medically you got to qualify, then I got to get the assets below $2,000. But, John, here's the other thing we can do, because to spend down, if you think mom and dad are getting sick and you want to take care of them, we can do what is called a personal care contract. Mom and dad can pay the child. You move it over to an account to hold for the parents down the road if they need it, or to help pay those expenses for taking care of them at home. And there's certain language you got to have in that personal care contract. That they need nursing home, but you're taking care of them. And then what we do is we get, I go to the Commission on Aging. They'd say, here's what we would pay if we took care of your parents at home. So that gives us a comparable figure. And then I get a doctor's statement saying, by the kids taking care of mom and dad at home, otherwise they'd be going to a nursing home. So there's certain criteria I have to get for that personal care contract.
Or you buy burial services.
Well, you can, irrevocable burial expense. And that's what I always say, Brown's Funeral Home.
Good people.
Good people.
Yeah.
You go to them and you buy that funeral expense, and I recommend that to everybody. Now, funny story is I've already got my burial expense, or irrevocable burial contract. So I told the lady, I don't want any service. She goes, you're going to be gone. She goes, we're going to do whatever we want.
Exactly.
So then I said, well, Wendy, I said, if anybody comes in here and cries, throw them out. Now, Danny, I can't do that.
Throw them out.
But you can arrange anything you want, so you
Don't tell him, he looks so good, that's a rotting carcass. He's not looking good.
I think I'm going for the cremation because I don't know anybody's going to be allowed to cut the grass above the gravesite. So,
I'm going to write that one down. If anybody comes here crying, throw them out.
It's actually in my will that there will be an open bar.
Oh, that's great.
Really?
And
closed casket, open bar.
And, John, you can write anything in your will you want. And I tell people that sometimes. I mean, I had a client one time, kids, we spent all your money. You can put, and I've referenced Benjamin Franklin because his son sided with the British during the Revolutionary War. Disinherited him, but he went on to criticize him because he said if the British would have won, I'd have been dead. So he didn't leave his son anything.
Does that dramatic will reading that is featured in most mystery movies never happens?
I mean, people call and say, do you mind reading a will for us? And you don't need to do that.
But we gather the family together and...
I've only done it once or twice. I say you don't need to do it. That's why I strongly encourage people, don't get caught up in these shows. There's people on TV, you need a trust. You don't. Check what you want to do and try to keep it as simple as possible. I'll give you an example, and it's not an attorney locally. So don't get me caught up in it.
A minute and a half.
Okay. But anyway, keep everything as simple as possible. This attorney wrote this will, and all this flowery language. It was about 3 or 4 pages long. I'm sure he charged $1,500 to $2,000, maybe more. And all he was doing, mom to wife, mom to dad, and then down to the children. Just a simple will. Just say it. And you don't have to put all this flowery language in there.
Right.
So, and then I want to make, other thing we have at the office, if anybody wants to stop by, it's helpful hints. Keep your will in a safe place. Mm-hmm. And if it's in a safe...
multiple copies.
And you can, but the original is what you're really looking for. Mm-hmm. But if it's a safe deposit box, make sure the children or your beneficiary have access to it. Because banks sometimes will say, because you don't have access to it, and get you held up, And, you can write instructions. Hey, kids, I've got this bank account, because if you don't have it, many times you'll lose it because nobody knows that account.
Danny, how do people get in touch with you to take care of this stuff?
Daniel Staggers, 133 East John Street, Martinsburg, West Virginia, 304-267-3915. Or my email is staggersmartinsburg@gmail.com.
Thank you, Danny.
You're welcome.
Good to see you again, sir.
I know you are.
Back with the final minute after these.